because of my instruction somehow, I ended up thinking so much more about Anicca and Anatta and Dukkha that I think I might start out the conversation rather than going toward generosity, which I always love talking about as one of the 10 Paramis. But I'm just thinking about what the recent changes in the pandemic and its new variants, and life has revealed to us once again this deep truth of uncertainty. And just when we might have thought that we could let our guard down, and so much has changed again, and we really realize uncertainty is the underlying reality of life, and it's what always has been true. Everything is unstable and temporary, and nothing is as solid as it appears. And it's interesting because we can say this and know it intellectually, but we don't really live from this truth. We do a little more so as practitioners. But, underlying, there's still this belief that everything will stay the same is a kind of delusion. And I really find it remarkable how the mind is so powerful that it paints a picture of stability in a world of change, from moment to moment and from day to day. And in the Buddhist traditions, directly seeing impermanence and uncertainty is the central feature of meditation and a path to insight. And from the perspective of the heart, the real issue is not the uncertainty and change, but it's our relationship to it. How do we handle the truth of change when forced to face it so directly? And when faced with this difficult truth, the most liberating question isn't how do I regain control, which is sort of where I tend to go. I suppose we all do it first, because we never really had control in the first place. And the liberating question is, how am I relating to this? And I'm noticing myself attempting more and more, as soon as I see myself grabbing for control about something, of reiterating to myself, how am I relating to this? What is happening in the mind? What is the attitude of the mind? Contemplative practice of meditation helps us to realize that we do have sort of control over some things, but we don't really have influence, and we can't control most of what happens in life, but we can have some say over how we relate to things. And we can step back and reflect wisely about how much control do I actually have here. And when we do this, we can begin to recognize what we have direct influence over is our internal landscape. What we do with our mind and with our heart, how we think, and where we place our attention. What we do in this moment, right here and right now, is what matters. The Dalai Lama, who has known profound pain and dislocation in his life, and he put it very simply, if you have fear of some pain or suffering, you should examine whether there is anything you can do about it. If you can, there's no need to worry. If you cannot do anything, then there's also no need to worry. So if we notice anxiety and tension and fear, or worst case scenarios spinning out, that's the time to pause and take a deep breath. Feel our bodies. Notice the sights and the sounds around us, and feel the support of the ground underneath us. I like to bring my attention to my feet when I'm walking. I'm just feeling the ground beneath me. course, there's recalling the truth that everything changes, including difficult emotions that we're feeling. This too shall pass quote that we see over and over. People have it tattooed to their arms. It's a good reminder. And it's not about disconnecting or cutting ourselves off from what we feel. It's about not losing perspective or getting spun out. We want to go in and feel what we're feeling, but have some control over our perspective. And this kind of moment-to-moment practice helps us to keep an even keel when the seas are rough. Lots of times Ajahn Amaro and some other people use the image of a boat in a storm, and you know that the boat doesn't stay perfectly level. It rocks and it sways and it swells, and having a keel doesn't mean that we don't feel moved by the changes of life. It just means that when the big waves come, our boat doesn't capsize. And maintaining the perspective helps us to roll with the waves and with each swell, and it brings us back to a quiet knowing deep in our heart, and helps us to return upright, to find our center again, coming back to the breath, coming back to the present moment, coming back to noticing what's the attitude in the mind right now. And this understanding of constant change is actually rooted in trusting the present moment, which is really hard to do when we're in the middle of something that seems like it's hard to trust. But there's no place else that we can live. There's nowhere to run to. There's no better or happier or safer place somewhere over there. It's when we can breathe and ease into the reality of this moment that we can find true inner freedom. And it's a freedom that comes not from controlling life, but from a flexibility of inner strength that can meet the hard stuff with a steady eye and be with whatever happens. When we find even a little bit more stability and balance in times of great change, we're also then more available for others. And we're able to be there for our kids or our parents or our neighbors or co-workers. We can be in touch with the truth of uncertainty, and we can bring forth beautiful qualities of the heart and the mind, of kindness and patience and compassion and generosity, which are a few of the 10 Paramis. And so just the idea of finding stability in the ever-changing moment is not easy. And that's where some of these paramis of generosity and harmonious living, encouraging beautiful qualities of the mind to put our attention toward letting go, naturally watching things that we hold on to, attitudes of mind that we hold on to, fall away. And wisdom can arise so that we can see clearly and have insight into what's happening. And we have just enough energy to have the practice be awake and aware and open in this moment. It's perfected. Wisdom is perfected by the arousing of energy. And then there's patience, which you hear me talk about a lot. And patience leads on to truth, truthfulness. That comes next in the paramis after patience. And there's a determination or a resolve. And there's loving kindness. There's equanimity. And all of these paramis are beautiful qualities of the heart and mind that can come to the present when we're in the midst of these surprising changes that are always happening. So I think I'll just stop there for a moment so that we can talk a little bit about impermanence in our lives, and maybe if any of those paramis come to the fore, I can go over what they are again. And I might mention generosity because it's the first one of the paramis. It's common to all beings, and we can practice giving. It's very easy to practice. It has characteristics of letting go, of relinquishing, and it can dispel greed, all things that can be given away. It manifests as non-attachment. It helps us on our path in this present day life of being a bodhisattva, of helping ourselves and helping others. I gathered a few quotes on generosity from the Buddha. I think I'll read them, and then I'll let you talk to me. Giving, a Dharma life, caring for relatives, and blameless deeds. This is the greatest fortune. This is from Sutta Nipata 263, and something from the Dhammapada. The gift of the Dharma surpasses all gifts. The generosity of the Dharma. And one from the Samyutta Nikaya is, some provide from the little they have, others who are affluent don't like to give. An offering given from what little one has is worth 1,000 times its value. Even if one throws away the rinsing from a pot or a cup into the village pool or pond, wishing that the living beings there feed on them, even this would be a source of merit, not to speak of giving a gift to human beings, which is fascinating to have this quote from one of the Buddha's sayings to be about, rinsing your cup out when you're done drinking, rinsing that cup and tossing it back into the pool or the pond. You're feeding living beings in the water. And one from the Samyutta Nikaya is, by giving, one unites friends. And I'm sure you've heard this one quite a few times. Monks, if people knew as I know the fruits of sharing gifts, they would not enjoy their use without sharing them, nor would the taint of stinginess obsess the heart. Even if it were their last bit, their last morsel of food, they would not enjoy its use without sharing it if there was someone else to share it with. If beings knew, as the great sage has said, how the result of sharing has such great fruit, then subduing the stain of selfishness with brightened awareness, they'd give in season to the noble one, where a gift bears great fruit. It always reminds me of the quote of, if a being knew as I knew, they would never let a meal go by without sharing. And it brings me to reflect on Kamala's experience when Munindraji used to stay with him. I might have even mentioned this just a couple weeks ago, because he would always feed the ants or, the geckos. He would leave little bits of food when he was eating there to share with others. And when I think about that simple way of generosity, we can just put a little food out our back door for the squirrels to have, or share a little bit with someone else in some way. And this act of generosity as the first parami is the way that we can bring beautiful qualities of the mind of the heart to our hearts and minds, especially when we might find ourselves being caught up in the stress of impermanence. That generosity is a beautiful quality of the mind. And it leads on to sila, or harmonious living. So I'll probably go on with some of the other paramis at a later time, but I think for now I'll just thank you for listening to the Dhamma and have us have some conversation.